Chainsaw hook. Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre proved in 1974 that extreme horror could be achieved with minimal budget and maximum creativity. Produced on just $300,000, the film created one of horror's most disturbing sequences through suggestion rather than explicit gore. When Pam enters the Sawyer family house, she discovers furniture constructed from human bones and lampshades made from stretched human skin. Before she can escape, Leatherface appears and impales her on a meat hook through her back, leaving her hanging while he butchers her boyfriend with a chainsaw mere feet away. The scene's power comes not from graphic violence, but from Pam's agonized screams and her helpless perspective as she watches the murder. The meat hook wasn't actually inserted into actress Terry McMinn's back. Instead, she was suspended by a harness hidden beneath her clothes, though she still suffered bruising from hanging for extended takes in the oppressive Texas heat. The film was inspired partly by real serial killer Ed Gein, who made furniture from human remains in 1950s Wisconsin. Stephen King famously called the film cataclysmic terror, and it currently holds an 85% rating on Rotten Tomatoes with a 92 out of 100 Metacritic score. The meat hook scene became so iconic that it influenced decades of torture horror cinema while remaining one of the most effective examples of sustained dread rather than momentary shock. Hereditary Decapitation. Ari Aster's Hereditary shocked audiences in 2018 with a death scene so unexpected and brutal that many viewers required time to process what they'd witnessed. After attending a party, Peter rushes his younger sister Charlie to the hospital after she suffers anaphylactic shock from eating cake containing walnuts. As Peter speeds through darkness, Charlie leans out the window, desperately gasping for air. When Peter swerves to avoid hitting a dead deer, Charlie's head strikes a telephone pole, instantly decapitating her. The true horror comes not from the split-second impact, but from Peter's response. He drives home in complete shock, parks in the driveway, and goes to bed, leaving his mother to discover Charlie's headless body in the back seat the following morning. The scene was technically complex, requiring a combination of practical effects, a stunt performer, and digital removal. Actor Alex Wolff remained in character between takes to maintain his traumatized state, a method that later required him to seek therapy. Director Aster has stated this moment was based on a real 2004 incident where a driver's passenger was decapitated by a telephone pole guy wire in Georgia, and the driver similarly drove home without calling police. The scene subverts horror conventions by killing off what appeared to be a main character barely 30 minutes into the film, leaving audiences uncertain about any character's safety for the remainder of the story. Terrifier Bedroom. Terrifier 2 arrived in October 2022 as an ultra-low-budget independent horror film that somehow became a theatrical phenomenon. Director Damien Leone created this film on just $250,000, yet it grossed over $15 million and became legendary for audience reactions. The bedroom murder sequence features Art the Clown breaking into a teenager's home and attacking her with various weapons in a scene that lasts over 5 minutes of unrelenting brutality. What makes it particularly disturbing is Leone's refusal to cut away or provide relief. The camera remains unflinching as Art methodically dismembers his victim with a variety of household items and tools. The practical effects, created by Leone himself, are so realistic that multiple theaters reported audience members vomiting or fainting during screenings. Actor David Howard Thornton performed the entire sequence in character, maintaining Art's unsettling mime-like movements and expressions throughout. The scene generated enormous social media discussion, with viewers challenging others to watch the film while simultaneously warning against it. Reports of people passing out in theaters actually became part of the marketing strategy, attracting viewers who wanted to test their own limits. The film's success led to widespread theatrical expansion and proved that word of mouth about extreme content could still drive box office in the streaming era. Thing Defibrillator. John Carpenter's The Thing showcased practical effects mastery in 1982 that remains shocking today. Special effects artist Rob Bottin created the chest-bursting defibrillation scene, which has become legendary in horror effects history. When Norris suffers an apparent heart attack, the camp doctor attempts to revive him with defibrillator paddles. As the paddles make contact, Norris's chest suddenly splits open like a giant mouth lined with teeth, biting off the doctor's hands at the wrists. The effect required a sophisticated animatronic chest cavity operated by multiple puppeteers beneath the floor, with practical blood pumps creating realistic arterial spray. Actor Charles Hallahan spent 10 days with Bottin creating prosthetics and practicing the physical performance required for the transformation sequence. The scene then continues as Norris's severed head sprouts spider-like legs and attempts to escape across the floor, an effect that required a separate animatronic head controlled by nearly a dozen technicians. What makes the scene particularly effective is its combination of sudden shock with prolonged, grotesque imagery. Just when viewers think the horror has peaked, the detached head reveals an entirely new nightmare. The scene influenced countless body horror films that followed, and demonstrated how practical effects could create images that digital effects still struggle to match in tactile authenticity. Cannibal Holocaust. Ruggero Deodato's Cannibal Holocaust crossed ethical boundaries in 1980 when it depicted a documentary crew's journey into the Amazon rainforest that ends in their brutal deaths at the hands of indigenous tribes. The most notorious sequence shows the crew filming as tribe members impale a suspected adulteress on a large wooden stake that enters her body and exits through her mouth. The impalement scene used practical effects, with the actress sitting on a bicycle seat hidden beneath her while holding a wooden stake in her mouth. But the explicit nature of the imagery created the convincing illusion of actual violence. More controversially, 7 animals were killed during production, with 6 deaths shown on screen, leading to animal cruelty charges against Deodato in Italy. The director was briefly arrested and charged with murder, because authorities believed the human death scenes were also real, forcing the cast to appear on Italian television to prove they were alive. The film pioneered the found footage horror subgenre that would later include The Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity, but its extreme content led to bans in dozens of countries. Italy didn't unban it until 2005, while the British Board of Film Classification required cuts to animal cruelty scenes before allowing release in 2003, after 20 years banned. The film remains controversial in horror discussions, with some viewing it as a powerful indictment of exploitative documentaries, while others see it as the very exploitation it claims to critique. Midsommar Cliff. Ari Aster's Midsommar subverted horror conventions in 2019 by setting its most disturbing sequence in broad daylight during a beautiful summer festival in rural Sweden. The Ättestupa ceremony shows 2 72-year-old elders voluntarily jump from a cliff as part of an ancient ritual that dictates community members should die before becoming burdens. The elderly woman dies instantly upon impact, but the elderly man survives the fall with catastrophic injuries, his legs shattered and skull partially crushed. As he screams in agony, young cult members calmly approach with mallets and proceed to crush his head to complete the ritual mercy killing. The scene's horror comes from the combination of brutal violence with the community's serene acceptance. They view this as a sacred, beautiful tradition, while visitors and audiences recoil in disgust. The scene was shot on a 30-foot green screen ramp in Hungary, with stunt performers landing on massive airbags, digitally removed in post-production. The elderly actors were replaced with dummies for the impact shots, which were designed with breakaway skulls filled with realistic blood and tissue effects. What makes the sequence particularly unsettling is how Aster juxtaposes the graphic violence with gorgeous cinematography and the community's gentle singing. The cult members comfort each other after the deaths, as if they'd just witnessed something transcendent rather than traumatic. The scene establishes that this seemingly idyllic community operates by rules completely alien to Western viewers, creating dread about what other beautiful traditions await. By the way, if you're into this type of content, I make videos like this all the time. A subscription would really help me out. Salò Torture. Pier Paolo Pasolini's Salò, or the 120 Days of Sodom, remains banned in several countries nearly 50 years after its November 22, 1975 release. Based on the writings of the Marquis de Sade and set in 1944 fascist Italy, the film depicts acts of torture, sexual violence, and degradation that push cinema into territories most directors wouldn't approach. The torture circle sequence occurs in the film's final section, where teenage captives are forced to watch through windows as their peers are tortured, mutilated, and killed in various horrific ways. 4 wealthy libertines kidnap 18 teenagers and subject them to escalating psychological and physical abuse over 120 days. The scene's composition deliberately evokes Dante's circles of hell, with victims arranged in theatrical tableaus of suffering, while their captors watch like an aristocratic audience at an opera. The film's graphic content led it to be banned in 9 countries at release, including the United States, with some bans remaining in effect today. Pasolini was murdered shortly before the film's release in a crime never fully solved, lending the work an additional layer of tragedy and controversy. Many critics view the film as an allegory for fascism's dehumanization of victims, though others argue no political message can justify the explicit imagery. The film remains Pasolini's most divisive work, with defenders praising its unflinching political commentary, while critics condemn it as unwatchable exploitation masquerading as art. Saw Bathroom. James Wan's Saw launched an entire franchise in 2004 with a twist ending that redefined modern horror, but its most disturbing sequence occurs in the grimy bathroom where most of the film takes place. Two men wake up chained at opposite sides of a bathroom with a corpse between them and instructions for a deadly game. The scene's power comes from its inevitable conclusion. One man must saw through his own foot with a rusty hacksaw to escape before time runs out. As he realizes he has no choice, he uses his belt as a tourniquet, raises the saw, and begins cutting through his own ankle in agonizing detail. The sequence was shot with practical effects, including a prosthetic foot filled with blood tubes, but actor Cary Elwes's performance sells the psychological horror of a man forcing himself to commit self-mutilation. Produced on a micro-budget of $1.2 million, the film grossed $103 million worldwide, proving that a single location and strong concept could succeed without expensive effects. The bathroom was deliberately designed to feel claustrophobic and filthy, with the walls painted in sickly green and brown tones, and rust effects added to every surface. The film's success spawned 10 sequels, and popularized torture-focused horror as a subgenre, though few subsequent entries matched the original's psychological intensity, rather than simply escalating gore. Irreversible Attack. Gaspar Noé's Irreversible contains what many consider the most brutal murder scene ever filmed, made even more disturbing by the director's decision to present events in reverse chronological order. Released in May 2002, the film's opening sequence follows a man through the Paris nightclub called Le Rectum, seeking revenge for an earlier assault. When he finds the wrong person, he beats the innocent victim's face with a fire extinguisher in a single, unbroken take that lasts several minutes. The camera never cuts away, as the victim's skull gradually collapses and deforms, with practical effects creating a sickening progression from recognizable human to unidentifiable mass. The technique of holding one shot forces viewers to endure the entire duration without relief, creating a uniquely agonizing viewing experience. Actor Joe Prestia wore a prosthetic skull cap that could progressively break down, with makeup effects artists adjusting the prosthetic between takes during the marathon shoot. The scene was filmed in an actual Paris nightclub with red lighting that adds a hellish quality to the violence. Noé has stated he wanted viewers to experience violence not as exciting action, but as a horrifying reality that destroys lives. The reverse chronology means viewers see this brutal death before understanding its context, initially perceiving the murderer as a villain, only to later learn he's avenging a sexual assault. The film premiered at Cannes, where hundreds of audience members walked out, with some requiring medical attention from nausea. The scene remains one of cinema's most unflinching depictions of violence, refusing to aestheticize or soften the reality of murder. Evil Dead. Sam Raimi's directorial debut, The Evil Dead, featured a scene in October 1981 that led to the film being banned in multiple countries. While the entire film is relentlessly violent, the scene where the film depicts character Cheryl being attacked by possessed trees remains controversial decades later. Cheryl ventures into the woods at night and is grabbed by animated tree branches that tear her clothes and assault her in what's clearly coded as a violent attack. The scene was created through a combination of mechanical tree limbs operated by the crew and point-of-view camera work that puts viewers in the position of the attacking force. Actress Ellen Sandweiss endured extremely difficult conditions during the multi-night shoot in freezing Tennessee woods, with crew members operating branch mechanisms while she reacted to marks rather than actual props. Raimi has since expressed regret about including the scene, acknowledging it crossed lines of good taste, even for an extreme horror film. The scene contributed to the film's inclusion on Britain's Video Nasties list, which led to prosecution for retailers who stocked the film. The UK ban lasted until the film was re-released in 2001, with cuts to this sequence. Despite, or perhaps because of its controversial content, The Evil Dead became a cult classic that launched Raimi's career and spawned multiple sequels. The film's combination of ultra-low-budget guerrilla filmmaking with unapologetically extreme content helped establish the template for independent horror cinema that continues today. Martyrs Flaying. Pascal Logier's Martyrs represents extreme horror with philosophical depth. Released in September 2008, this French horror film follows a young woman's quest for revenge against those who tortured her as a child, only for the film to transform into something far more disturbing in its second half. The flaying sequence occurs after the protagonist discovers an underground facility where women are systematically tortured in an attempt to bring them to a transcendent state beyond death. The scene shows a captive woman who has been skinned alive but kept conscious through medical intervention, her muscles and tissues visible without any protective skin layer. The practical effects, created by a team of French makeup artists, used a full-body prosthetic with individually applied layers of artificial muscle tissue painted to look fresh and wet. What makes the scene particularly disturbing is its clinical presentation. The torture is not sadistic pleasure, but coldly scientific experimentation, with the torturer explaining their philosophical goals while the victim suffers. The film divides audiences between those who view it as a profound meditation on suffering and transcendence, and those who see it as nihilistic exploitation. The flaying scene became so infamous that a 2015 American remake significantly toned it down, leading fans of the original to dismiss the remake as toothless. Laugier has stated he intended the film as an examination of how humans search for meaning through extremes, though critics argue the graphic content overwhelms any philosophical message. The film remains France's most controversial horror export, inspiring intense debates about whether extreme violence can serve artistic or philosophical purposes. Hostile Torture. Eli Roth's Hostel introduced mainstream audiences to torture-focused horror when it was released in January 2006. The film's most disturbing sequence shows wealthy clients paying to torture kidnapped backpackers in a Slovakian facility designed specifically for this purpose. The extended torture scene features a businessman who has paid for the experience methodically cutting and burning his victim, while the victim remains conscious and aware throughout. What distinguished Hostel from previous torture scenes was its exploration of torture as consumer entertainment, with the facility offering different pricing tiers and torture implements like a grotesque vacation package. The practical effects combined prosthetic body parts with genuine props, including authentic surgical tools that Roth acquired through medical supply companies. Actor Jay Hernandez endured multiple 12-hour shooting days strapped to the torture chair while wearing extensive prosthetic wounds that took hours to apply each morning. The film launched the torture-focused horror subgenre, though Roth has argued the film critiques American imperialism and the commodification of violence rather than celebrating it. The film was banned in Germany and New Zealand, though both countries have since lifted these restrictions. Despite grossing nearly $82 million worldwide on a $4.8 million budget, Hostel remains divisive, with some viewers seeing social commentary, while others find only gratuitous cruelty. The film's success led to 2 sequels and countless imitators, establishing torture horror as a dominant subgenre throughout the mid-2000s, before audience fatigue eventually led to its decline. If this was worth your time, consider subscribing so you catch every new upload. Thanks for watching.